Apple Knocker Radio.
Okay, greetings, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. While I was setting up my interview with Mitch Horowitz, I mentioned a book to him titled The Goblin Universe. I was surprised that Horowitz was unfamiliar with the book. I say I was surprised because Horowitz is a scholar of the metaphysical, alternative spiritual consciousness, weirdness history of all kinds. His work is mainly focused in the New Thought in the United States, but clearly his knowledge extends throughout the entire history of these topics. But on top of that, The Goblin Universe, while it was originally published in England in 1986, it was also published in the same year in 1986 by Llewellyn Publishing, which is one of the heavies in the field. And for whatever reason, the book seems to have slipped through the cracks of time, and I just want to talk about it for various reasons. Number one, because I think it ranks up there with the works of John Keel and Jacques Vallée in these fields of paranormal research. But it has one unique claim to fame, in that it is very focused on the Loch Ness Monster, which I know, hear me out. The Loch Ness Monster was always too far even for my very high tolerance for weirdness. The Loch Ness Monster is even too much for me. But after reading the book, I take it a little more serious. I'm a little more interested in it. I'm not gonna become a Nessie hunter, but I am a little more interested in the concept. In the same way that John Keel's work is what sparked my interest in UFOs. I previously had never cared about UFOs, like, at all. I still don't care about nuts and bolts UFOs. I find the whole thing just boring, as strange as that is. I can't really say why. Keel got me interested in UFOs as a phenomenon of consciousness or some aspect of the deep nature of reality that we don't yet understand. Well, Holiday does the same thing for the Loch Ness Monster. This is the Goblin Universe. Got this 1986 cover, which looks very dated now, very poor computer graphics. But what it's trying to... Dang, this light! But what it's trying to show is actually very interesting and pertinent to the book. Because here's the grid, and on one side is the body of Nessie, and on top is Nessie's head sticking out. So that's Nessie's head sticking out into our reality, and the rest of him is submerged in some other dimension, right? And that's basically the underlying thesis of the book. The book is not entirely focused on the Loch Ness Monster. It's an examination of all. It actually has the first chapter has the spookiest ghost stories I've ever read in my life. I'm not usually spooked by ghost stories, but the way he described them is actually kind of spooky to me. But, okay, so Ted Holiday was born in 1921. He passed away in 1979. He was an Englishman. He served in the Royal Air Force. I believe he fought in World War II, although I'm sorry I failed to verify that before starting this video. But he then went on to be a journalist. He was specifically an angling, aka fishing journalist. But he worked in, journalists work in all kinds of niches and specialties. And his work gave him a very adventurous lifestyle. He traveled around the world observing wildlife for his various journalistic pieces. So he's a neat guy, had a very interesting life, which allowed him also access to explore firsthand a lot of these aspects of weirdness. Now, the Loch Ness story captured his interest with that iconic black and white photo that I think everybody knows. He saw that, and his interest in the Loch Ness Monster was sparked, and it was a lifelong interest of his. Now, it's interesting because like John Keel and like Jacques Vallée, who started out looking into the UFO phenomenon as nuts and bolts guys who were looking into a nuts and bolts phenomena. By nuts and bolts, I mean metal spaceships or some kind of physical material flying across vast reaches of space from some other planet and coming here. But both Keel and Vallée ended up determining that whatever these things are, they seem to, number one, be related to human consciousness in some weird way that we can't understand, but they also seem to be multidimensional as opposed to simply flying here from another planet. And Holiday comes to the same conclusions. Now, Holiday was aware of the work of Keel and Vallée, so it's not like he came to these conclusions completely independently. He was studying their work as he was doing his own work. But still, as he was trying to understand the Loch Ness Monster, he came to also conclude that if the phenomenon is real, and he does believe the phenomenon is real, or he did believe the phenomenon was real, then it is somehow related to the thing. There's something about the nature of reality itself that we don't fully grasp yet. And the Loch Ness Monster is moving in and out of dimensions of reality somehow. Now that's oversimplifying it. It's very greatly oversimplifying it, but it's basically the gist of Vallée and Keel's conclusions about UFOs, but also about Holliday's conclusions about the Loch Ness Monster. And in his depth, his knowledge of the Loch Ness phenomenon, but also of all the surrounding things around the Loch Ness Monster, is really fascinating stuff. Like, I didn't know that there are old prehistoric sites there that show that the early people there were like worshipping or fearing like a dragon, right? Which would be like the Loch Ness Monster itself, right? So there's some evidence. How strong you want to take that evidence is your prerogative, but there is some evidence that even prehistoric people were seeing this Loch Ness phenomenon, right? Which is really, really weird. But there's also a really fascinating part in the story where he actually takes a Catholic priest and performs an exorcism on Loch Ness to try to get rid of the monster. That's really, really interesting as well, because he begins to tie the whole thing into some phenomenon of consciousness, like I was saying, and these things are multidimensional, coming in from some other place that is like beside us and yet that we can't grasp or feel. And which then starts to make you connect it to older paranormal experiences with things such as demons, devils, jinn, all of these things. And so kind of lumping it into that, he actually brings a Catholic priest out, and they go and they actually exorcise Loch Ness. That's a really neat aspect of the book. But yeah, so if you've never seriously considered the Loch Ness Monster, this book might change your mind. Holliday writes about it. Oh, and there's another book he wrote preceding this called The Dragon in the Circle, in which he focused exclusively on the Loch Ness Monster and things associated with it. This book is like the majority of it is the Loch Ness Monster, but he goes into all kinds of phenomena, some very, very weird stories. It reminds me of many of Keel's books. Keel is mostly known for the book that is today known as the Mothman Prophecies. That wasn't actually the original title, but that's what it's known for today. But a lot of Keel's other books gather together various stories. A lot of them are various essays that he wrote, or essays and pieces that he wrote for newspapers and magazines, and lumped them together into one book. With the thread running through them all is Keel's consistently asking, like, what does this phenomenon actually mean? And this book is similar to that. It's the same as that. That's how this book is written. Although there is a good chunk of it dedicated to the Loch Ness Monster, there are also many parts dedicated to all kinds of strange phenomenon around the world that I've never heard of before. When you are interested in these topics, you tend to start coming across the same stories over and over again. But Holliday discusses quite a few stories that I've never heard before. And so the book, it's really fun. It's a fun book, but it's also very serious, and it's efforts to try to understand what is actually happening. And Holliday also, he's got a fighter in him, man, because he's aware of what the scientific materialists will say about these things, and he takes on the scientific materialist skeptics head on. And kind of fearlessly, and isn't afraid to call nonsense when he sees nonsense. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, as with anything else, that I totally agree with everything that he says. I always assume that goes without saying, but it's not. I mean, my thoughts are my thoughts, right? I'm not here to criticize or pick apart Holliday, but I admire, whether I agree or disagree, I admire a man who's willing to take up fisticuffs for what he thinks. And especially when he's kind of punching up at the scientific materialist establishment. And so I respect that about him, and I think it adds a little punch to the writing. It gives it another element that I enjoy. But yeah, this is a book that I think has unfairly been forgotten. And I mean, I'm sure this happened with one of my other videos. Somebody popped in and is like, "This book is not forgotten. I know about it." Dude, I know there's some people that know about the book, but I'm saying that I think there are not as many people that. I think there are a lot of people that would enjoy this book and could get something useful out of this book who haven't yet encountered it. And, this is something I meant to discuss at the beginning of this video, and I wish I had. But with all of these things, the question always comes to why? Who cares, right? Like, who really cares about the paranormal phenomenon? And while I was writing this book reading this book, again, putting my notes together and preparing to make this video, the question was turning over in my head because I'm actually getting ready to make another video, which I think I'm going to title "No Country for Navel Gazers," in which I want to discuss why these things interest me and the direction that I want to take this channel, because I'm going to make a couple tweaks to it. Because I am a practical person, and I'm a person, I believe that we are here to be as useful as we can, which then is useful to our fellow human beings. And so, I mean, that's one reason. That's not the sole reason. I think that's a very important piece of why we're here, right? I believe we do have moral obligations on this earth. And so, I ask myself the question a lot, like all of this time that I spend contemplating the paranormal and the UFOs, etc., who cares, right? But I know why I care. What I mean is the question, is any of this worth the time for me making videos and sharing it with people? Am I just wasting other people's time with stupid, pointless entertainment? And I do not believe that is the case. I don't believe that's the case for two reasons. Number one, whatever phenomenon this points to is something that is an aspect of reality that we would benefit from understanding. Well, we could benefit from understanding, right? The implications of these things, they could be expanded to fit all kinds of, who knows what the possibilities are, basically, right? If we use this phenomenon to come to a new understanding of reality and how we interact with reality, the implications, who knows? They're so far reaching, you can't even really say. But number two, I believe there is something in all humans, or at least in many humans, including myself and probably including everybody who follows this channel. There's something in us that yearns for something deeper than the material world around us, right? Now, we can feed that hunger. Some people feed it with church and God. Some people feed it with esoteric spiritual practices. Some people feed it with mysticism. But I think a lot of people who are interested in the paranormal, and I am a person who is interested in a lot of those things that I just mentioned as well. So I don't think they're all mutually exclusive. They overlap a lot. But the paranormal, I think, is the most visceral experience that can give us a key into truly understanding these things, but not just truly understanding them. They're visceral because they're here, right? They're stories of things that were like right in front of people, and at least hypothetically would be right in front of us. And so they act as this really visceral entry point into the mystical, into the miraculous, the misunderstood. Now, a lot of people like to approach these things with a very scientific mind bent, and that's fine. Like, in this sense, the way I'm previously using those terms, I'm kind of using them metaphorically, I guess. So just what I'm saying is, however you choose to conceptualize it, or what the ultimate thing is that you're reaching for, however you define it, however you label it, my point is the paranormal is a tangible and visceral entry point into those things. And I think that's why so many of us hunger for it so much. And it's not my place. I'm not judging people who just want the thrill and a little bit of a scare to go chasing the weird. That's your life. It's all more power to you. I'm just saying, for me, it gets to the point where it's like, okay, that's fun and that's cool, but there's things that need to be done, right? Like my community, there's things I need to do in my community, for my family, for my friends, for my own being the best expression I could possibly be of myself. At some point, to me, chasing those paranormal things just becomes a waste of time. Like, like watching endless hours of cartoons or playing endless hours of video games. Like, it gets to a point where the utility is completely exhausted and it's nothing but more mindless entertainment. But to me, there's so much more to that. Like, the drive is because it's that visceral touch point to something deeper and more profound. You try to contemplate God, you try to contemplate all of these things, and they're so ambiguous and so nebulous that they're impossible. They can't give you any kind of warmth of emotion because they're just so nebulous, right? And so alien. But the paranormal is kind of a bridge between that. It's kind of like the doorway into that other world. It's something that is weird and bizarre, but something that you can at least kind of grasp in some sense, right? And so I think that's the importance of those things. And I think that's why we yearn for them. And that's why I do think that they are worth pursuing and contemplating and thinking about. At least for me, right? And I know for a lot of people out there as well. So, all right, that's about it, my friends. Again, this book, you can still buy this book. I don't know if they're still printing new copies, but like, you can still buy it online. You can find it. And I just highly recommend it. I think people out there will enjoy it. And if you have read it, or if you are going to read it because of this video, which I always love when my videos actually inspire people to buy the books or get them from the library or whatever, please let me know in the comments below. I love hearing about those things. Or if you have read the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because I love talking about this crazy stuff. So that's about it. Peace out, my friends.